What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for Your Overwatch. I was already planning on talking about Pharah in depth, as she's been seeing a very interesting drop in power, and then coincidentally yesterday, Jeff Kaplan promised that there is going to be improvements to the character, which kind of has me scratching my head, and you're going to have to let me know what you think about this in the comment section down below. Do we want to see Pharah get buffed? Because I would assume the majority of the community likes how much easier it is to play against Pharah, and how much better at the character you need to be to get her to work. But at the same time though, she also is one of the better answers to Brigitte, so any improvements to her can help see the Shield Maiden's power drop a little bit, who I think also is a character that is really difficult to take down. In today's video, we're going to discuss all the factors that have dropped the power level of Pharah, despite not being changed herself in quite a long time, and as well, where you should still consider picking her, even in this relatively weaker state. So how the heck did we get to this place? Because for a big percentage of Overwatch's life cycle, we continuously got messages about how annoying and oppressive Pharah was to play against, and I haven't seen any of that in quite some time. And if I look at the pick rate numbers, it also looks to tell the same story, that Pharah is more of a niche pick overall. Well, there's more things at play here than meets the eye. I think the most obvious answers is that range across the board just got a massive buff. Mei, Soldier, McCree, Hanzo, Widowmaker, it seems like all the range characters now pack a decent punch, so there's less of a disparity in ranged options when it comes to Pharah versus everything else. Because of course she has the jetpack, so back in the day, she could fly super high, get angles on the enemy, and simply just dish out more meaningful damage than they could at range. That has kind of fallen by the wayside. Not to mention the strength of the sniper characters now, more reliable Hanzo's shots, even he can shoot her out of the sky. All of that I think is quite obvious, but I think something that a lot of people don't remember is that the ground and pound game has also increased. Buffs and fixes came through on Doomfist, Reaper, and now the addition of Brigitte. Although Pharah technically counters all three of them, they're so effective at doing what they do on the ground, the requirement of the Pharah player's mechanical skill is higher than it's ever been before. I can say this confidently, even though Pharah is one of my go-to DPS picks, even still, whenever I can get the chance, and I don't think it's going to throw the game, even up against a character like Doomfist or Brigitte, where Pharah is supposed to be quite strong, hitting them and actually getting meaningful damage on either of them can be very difficult. Doomfist moves fast if the player's good, and Brigitte's shield can be a nuisance to get around, even though you technically can a lot of the time. So in general, I would say it's been the increase in lethality of the DPS picks across the board. There was a time where a lot of DPS characters in the game were simply unplayable, like they didn't really have an edge, and unless you were just insane at them, there was little reason to play them. Now I think you can make an argument for just about all of them, with only a few select heroes that are a bit more niche than others, and Pharah definitely fits in that category. And overall, I think that's fine, that's fair. Even though I'm a big Pharah player, I think it makes sense for the skill curve of the game. There was a period where Pharah got too much value for the amount of skill put in, and she just terrorized ranks, especially around like Platinum and below, where the hit scan play isn't quite good enough, mainly because the hit scan power wasn't good enough, but also all the other things that I've mentioned. And this escalates up the ranks as well, where if you look at the pick rates for Pharah right now, once you start to reach those middle ranks and go up and up, the pick rates go down and down, which almost is directly proportional to how good Widowmaker players are at that given rank, but also just general lethality out of the DPS position from any character that anyone decides to specialize in. So with that explained, let's go over a few reasons why you still would want to pick Pharah, and for me there's three good reasons. Counterpicking, taking the mirror match, or simply the map is so good for Pharah you can still play her. That's where I'm going to start. Maps like Oasis, Rialto, Dorado, all of them have high vertical cover for Pharah to play around. Anytime there's a map that has that, you can see Pharah see a lot of great use, because it can be hard for the enemy to find her coming on flanks or getting weird angles. She can hide up there near the skybox, out of line of sight, while still poking her head out periodically to deal damage. That's where she's going to look the most scary. I think the strongest version of this would be like First of Rialto defense, where she can pop her head over a building and get a knockoff onto the bridge. Thankfully, the map design of Overwatch helps add to hero diversity, and anytime they add a map that is very vertical in that way with a lot of buildings around, Pharah is going to look to be a good pick. Now, the second reason you might want to take Pharah is to take the battle to the skies. Of course, you can counter counter a Pharah with all of the other characters that we've mentioned earlier, but if you feel confident in your own top gun skills, and you either think you can get more value on the ground than the enemy Pharah, or challenge them mid-air in order to take them out of the skies, the Pharah mid-air battle is still a legitimate thing that's going to happen even in the pro meta, I think, on a couple maps, most notably Oasis, specifically the Garden stage, and perhaps even Lijiang Gardens as well, just for the sheer power that a defensive setup Pharah can have when controlling the objective on a control map. Even against some of her good counters, like hit scans, it's hard for them to get angles if they have to come retake into her spam. So that's always going to be strong. And then the last reason why I think you should definitely consider Pharah is as a counter pick. Like we said earlier, a lot of teams are going for this pure brawl-tastic anti-tank low ground damage, whether it be Junkrat, Doomfist, Reaper, especially when comboed with a Brigida. Pharah can definitely be a very good pick. But the problem for players that choose to go with Pharah is that now, with everything being so tanky, burst healing coming out of the Brigida, a big shield that you have to get past, and even some of these meteor characters like Doomfist and Reaper have a lot of health, so it takes multiple rockets to take them down, you have to be more accurate than you used to, I feel, with Pharah in the current meta. Like back in the Lucio Zen Mercy meta, targets were kind of squishy, and they moved really fast anyway, so let's face it, a lot of those one-shots people got onto Tracers were based on luck, at least back in the day in sort of the dive meta era. Now with things moving a bit slower and deliberate, in order to compete with the amount of tankiness everything has, you have to be even more accurate to have any impact nowadays at all. Because there's always been that aspect to Pharah that I think a lot of people don't know, is that overall, the amount of damage she can do is quite low actually. Like yeah, 120 damage per rocket is a big amount of burst, but she only shoots once a second. That's quite considerably slower compared to a lot of the other DPS characters, especially when you combine with their abilities. For example, Hanzo's Storm Arrow dishes out a ton of damage. McCree's got a stun Fan the Hammer that deletes a squishy, and also they have their regular abilities too. Pharah really only has a regular damaging ability and a bunch of mobility. So as the Pharah player, you really need a good excuse to be picking the character, to be making use of the jetpack that provides angles for you to exploit your opposition. And the biggest thing now that I've realized, trying to adapt to the way things work nowadays, you have to be perfect with your positioning as Pharah. Because at any moment, if you lose track of any of the range characters on the enemy team, even characters you thought used to not be a problem like Hanzo and Mei, they could just pop out and destroy you. So you gotta track where the enemy is much more carefully and be more accurate because things have more health, there's more healing in the game overall. Realistically, you need to treat Pharah, and I think I've heard this kind of said in pro circles as well, Pharah is kind of a off-sniper type hero. She's not quite Hanzo, obviously, she can't headshot, but her playstyle is quite similar in that she needs to be hitting 2 chunky rockets in a row on a squishy, sometimes 3 or 4, depending if armor packs and shielding is involved. So much like Hanzo taking spam angles and needing to hit a lot of reliable shots, Pharah is in the same place, where you really need a higher degree of projectile prediction in order to get any value out of her. Otherwise, you can easily find yourself hitting rockets that don't mean anything at all. They just charge the support ults, nothing ever dies, and your pick is just kind of wasted. So with that being the case, the biggest tip that I can give, despite the panic I may have just set into you, causing anxiety over these shots, you actually need to take more time to think out your shots, not rush to try to do as much damage as possible, because that's just not going to work. You have to look for very clean connections, which means you might have to shoot even slower than you did in the past. Because the problem is, it works way better to time out hitting 2 or 3 rockets really cleanly, rather than trying to spam out 6, missing half of them. If you do that, you'll never kill anything ever, and Pharah will be one of the worst picks in the game when played that way. But if you take your time to try to accurately read and trap enemies in their animations, you can see a lot of success. I have an entire video about this that I made quite a long time ago for Pharah projectile predictions, but I'll give you a shortened version using the examples from the footage from this video. This Oasis game, I think, perfectly describes what I'm talking about, where the enemy's going Reaper Doomfist, which you would think is going to give me a whole lot of space to do whatever I want, but the problem is, it almost requires me to step up and play amazing in order for us to even come close to getting a victory here. They do end up swapping to the McCree, who eventually builds up at high noon, which takes me out, sending me back to the spawn room and giving our opponents a lead, meaning that we are one lost team fight away from losing this game. Our Mercy goes down trying to res, and the team's in panic at this point. I'm trying to get on comms to tell them to focus up. The enemy's taking space. What do? Now we're down our Rhine, and it's just Brigida to stall the point. Doomfist Doomfist flies into our backline, kills my DPS buddy, and now it's my time to shine. Doomfist flying himself through the sky is something that you want to get used to hitting. You should note, after he does uppercut, he actually floats in air quite considerably and isn't going to be moving too much left or right. So as long as you account for gravity, you're pretty safe to aim the rocket at center of mass and it should connect. Then the idea is to hit rockets in between his big bursts of movement, because unless you're insane, you're not going to hit him while he's doing the animations for any of his skills. He rocket punches into the corner, which is poor positioning by him because I can lead the rocket towards where I know he has to go. And now with all of his cooldowns expended, I can follow him up with a 4th rocket in a row, accounting for the armor pack that almost saved his life, to confirm that kill. Now the next character that you have to get really good at shooting at is Brigitte, who is going to be tough to hit unless she makes a mistake like she does here in dropping her shield. She's trying to swing and flail, which is the big mistake from the Brigitte, so I actually luck out in landing connections on her. This is panic by the enemy team, failing them. If you play Brigitte, no, you don't have to drop that shield in order to try to do damage. It's actually a lot harder for Pharah to outplay you if you keep the shield up. But the way that we would have compensated for that, Pharah players, is leading the rockets a bit more in front of her so that when it lands, it hopefully splashes at her feet rather than trying to direct connect with her. But we're able to do that because she makes the mistake and doesn't block with her shield. Then here by the end, I've hit enough rockets that I'm going to be able to earn my way up to a barrage. The Moira, who's ulting, is a nightmare to try to hit, but predicting the pattern that I know she's going to try to take to get back to the point, we're able to do enough damage with my primary fire to easily be able to finish her. And then the barrage comes down on the tanks, and that, my friends, is going to be a round win on Oasis, one of the few maps that Pharah can have a major impact on still. And of course, another note, the enemy's playing Rein Zarya. That's another reason to want to consider Pharah. If you're able to sneak in concussive blasts in between the Zarya's bubbles, can manipulate the Rein's positioning, and of course, no diva means no answer for your barrages. So despite barrage being kind of tricky to use, if diva's not around, you can go for a lot more aggressive flanks in order to drop in on the enemy undetected and destroy some squishy targets. Brigitte is probably one of the best that you can kill overall in the game, especially if they don't have res. Using powerful abilities, including ultimates, just to secure a kill on Brigitte, sometimes even just a trade, is enough in order for your team to win out, because most people don't know how to stay alive against Brigitte, so she's one of the most important targets to kill a lot of the time. And one last example before we go that kind of wraps up everything that we discussed here today. We're going to take another closer look at Team USA's Point A attack on Rialto against Canada, where this Pharah, although making a lot of space in that the enemy has to largely avoid it, doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. And this is why, in general, Pharah's a bit better on defense right now, because if the enemy has to push the objective, you always have something to shoot at. Whereas on the defense here, Canada doesn't give them any targets. And with really strong positioning, Canada is able to ignore the Pharah and focus the front line. A lot of this hinged on the major power that Sombra has right now to get basically guaranteed disable impact. On the re-engage here, Hydration really only has Diva to shoot at, which is not the target he's looking for. And again, it's just such a slow playstyle, it allows the flank from Agilities to go largely uncontested. To compensate for this, Hydration tries to go for the big aggro play to get use out of the barrage, but Note sniffs it out yet again. He knows he's got to find some impact somewhere, but just by the sheer play of Canada, there's very little they can do. Keep in mind as well, they have the very rigorous backline of Ana, who not only can duel the Pharah, but when played well, really gives a major lifeline to outdeal the slow damage that Pharah brings. And it's not really until Hydration swaps over to the Sombra in a run-back maneuver in a stall fight where he gets half of his ult in his first go, way higher charge rate on that than he ever was on the Pharah pick, that they start getting things moving. And if you don't know, Hydration is one of the best Pharah players in the entire world. That's the thing. Even for him, there's spots where he struggles, so look out for that, Pharah players, and realize that just because you can stay alive, the increased DPS across the board in the game from every other character may be shredding your team, and you either have to have a higher degree of performance to compete against that or swap your hero. Guys, that's going to be everything for today's Pharah video. If you enjoyed it, please leave it a like, whether that's for the Pharah tips or if you are celebrating Pharah being finally not so good of a character for once. In either case, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe because we do upload each and every day, so you're going to want to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Linked in the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.